If you've been in my channel before, you already know I'm a simp for Rivals 2. And with very good reason, might I add. Ever since the first one, I've just simply been hooked on the series. I like the depth of the characters, I like the mechanical depth of the game, and even nowadays I'm focusing on stuff like lore. I never would have thought that I would do that for any franchise. And this has culminated all until the final release date of Rivals 2, when everything that the team has learned has come together in order to make a great game. So I'm going to do the job as a platform fighter channel and talk to you about everything that I consider relevant to the series. I'm going to talk about the mechanics of the game, I'm going to talk about the controversy of shields and ledges, I'm going to talk about single player, and finally, we're going to talk about the characters. Topics such as, is Rivals going to be free to play, isn't really what I consider important when I talk about the series, so things like that will be disregarded. Other than that, let's stop screwing around. Let's just get into everything to talk about for Rivals 2. Before we get to the controversy of shield and ledges, I believe we should talk about something, positive. And nothing is really talked more positively than the added mechanics that Rivals 2 has. There's three that come to mind for something like this. That would be Ledge Special, Get Up Special, and the Pummel System. Most explain what they do with their namesake alone, but let's go into a little more about it. When you go on ledge, usually there's not a lot of options that you have. You can either jump, you can either roll, or you can attack the person. But for this case, you can actually do a special input that gets an entirely different move. A good example is how Crag is doing it in the trailer. See, he presses B and actually a small wave of earth kind of fills the screen, hitting multiple people at once, which adds another option to defense. A second clear example would be what Raster does. He actually goes straight up and then slams on the ground in order to push people back. So that's pretty cool, but let's see the other two mechanics. Get Up Special is also a thing in this game. Usually when you're hit to the ground, you only have three options. You can either attack the attack, you can stop the attack, or you can wait and actually get up and attack the person. Get Up Attack, just like Ledge Special, gives another sort of defensive move that you can do against someone. The easiest character that I can show that does this is Rano. Rano can miss attack, stay there, and actually do the Get Up Special just so he can produce a bubble. This can potentially juke a lot of opponents, especially if you use sort of like down air in order to get the bubble and maybe you hit the person. Because if the opponent is coming to you and you're hitting down air, you're probably sucking them into bubble, and now that's just a combo. Which again, just like the other mechanic, is another added defense. But here's the final one that they added. Rivals actually made a pummel system, which is very interesting. Usually there's like 2 or 3 options you can do if you were to grab someone in a platform fighter. You can grab, pummel, then throw, just straight up throw, or if for some reason you don't want to do anything, you just let them break free. Now that's all fine except one part, which is the breaking free part. See, when it comes to getting out of a pummel, it's usually the same way across every single Smash series. You have to mash in order to get out of it. But why bring this up? Is mashing bad? Well, pretty much. See, when you mash out of something, not only are you flicking the control stick over and over again, but it can also like interact with the DI afterward when you were trying to avoid something. Essentially, if you're flicking the stick multiple times, you end up doing a lot of motions that you don't want to do. And because of that, sometimes you drift in a sort of way where you don't want to, just to get killed or be put in a disadvantaged situation. I say this only to compare this to Rivals 2, because they are doing this not only in a better way, but in a very creative way. Dan actually worked on a lot of other fighting games before he worked on Rivals of Aether. Primarily, he worked on Killer Instinct. And some of the principles to guarding that Killer Instinct actually has, some of it is actually in Rivals 2. See, for the pummel system of Rivals 2, when you grab someone, there's a few things that you can do. Either you can pummel, or you can press B, or you can throw someone. For pummel or pressing B, a person can actually press the same button as you in order to break free. So if you're predictable, you actually get a chance to get out of a person's grab. But if you fail this sort of 50-50 aspect, you're more than likely going to get hit with a lot more damage. On top of that, what I do like about this is if you actually don't want to deal with this sort of 50-50 setup, you can just like grab someone and just throw them a different way, just so you can avoid it. This makes grabbing very fair compared to like mashing, because it feels like your fault in the mix rather than you're doing something that is putting you at a disadvantage anyway. It seems that every single person that sees the mechanics of Rivals 2, at least the new ones like these, think that they're a good inclusion. And that's fine, I think so too. But before we get on to the controversy of the things, let's just go over some of the things that these new mechanics could bring that are kind of terrible. My only problem with mechanics like these is, at least with ledge specials and get up specials, if you make the special too good. Let's use Crag as another example. If get up attack versus, say, ledge special was compared to each other, and ledge special is just way better and has way more super armor or something like that, there's kind of no reason in order to do any other like move in the game. What I wouldn't want about ledge specials is it just completely invalidates every single other option in the game. Whether you'd have to buff this by making ledge get up or like get up attack like way stronger by having, I don't know, like invulnerability frames, I don't know. I'm just saying, if they're way different in power, then you're gonna feel that and you're only gonna go for one option. Same for get up special. If Rano's say special is not only good at avoiding attacks, but if you attack the bubble and you can actually get combos from it, it seems as though that the get up special for Rano is straight up better than just regular get up attack. I don't really feel this way for the pummel system, only because if a person is going for it over and over again, at least there is a chance that you could just deal with it. But to be fair, we don't really know if this problem is in the game yet, and these are only ideas that I've thought about over the passing months as more information has got here. So far, if that isn't the case, I do like their inclusion, and I'm really excited the fact that we get to play with them. Alright, now let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's go with the controversy. Shields and ledges. Okay, so I know I'm technically late to the party, but more than likely this issue is going to be brought up at some point in time when it comes to Rivals 2 releasing. But with the inclusion of these new mechanics that we've gotten that are only Rivals 2 related, we have gotten a few of the older mechanics from other platform fighters, which is shields and ledges. So, what does Software Neos feel when it comes to shields and ledges? Does he hate them, rebukes them in the name of Jesus, and just doesn't wish they were in the system and that they are horrible? Or is he just like every other Smash Bros. Player and just likes to slow play every day like a bitch? Well, here, I'll tell ya. At first I was apathetic, then I became sympathetic. Now I know that must rile up some people, and you know, it's like, oh, why did you, don't you like Rivals? Why do you like this inclusion? Okay, give me a sec. In order to understand the other side of the argument, you have to let them talk first. If you don't and you just create a little boogeyman in your head about how evil or how bad people are, it doesn't really get anywhere. So, let's explain it. There are three things to me that you would have to consider once this inclusion of shield and ledges exist. The first point is, what is Rivals? The second is mechanical, and the third is emotional. Now, you might not know what I'm talking about right now, but give me a sec, I'll explain it. The reason why I asked what is Rivals is because to different players, it's a very different answer. There's some players in the community that believe that Rivals is what it is. It is fast, it doesn't have any shields, and it doesn't have ledges, and it has cool characters. That is what Rivals is to them. Once you believe that this is what Rivals is, any sort of tinkering with the quote-unquote formula that they came up with, it means bad things to them. Because when you have a fast, very forward-pacing game such as this, only to include things like shields that can slow down the pace a little bit, it completely destroys what they think what Rivals is. Once you understand this reasoning to players, it makes sense why other people hate shields and ledges. Some of you might be saying right now, Software Neos, what do you mean those people? Do you not agree with them? And I'm sorry to say, dear viewer, but yes, I don't agree with this notion. I do not believe that the identity of Rivals is to be fast, is to be no ledges and have no shields and things like that. I don't feel like that is Rivals' identity. Rivals' identity has always been to me, and even Dan Fornace has always been characters. And I'm not even talking about characters in the sense of many people like them, say like Smash Brothers characters where they're always popular. I more so mean character gimmicks. I think the only fighting games that come close to giving characters actual good gimmicks, or like full through depth of gimmicks that I would want in a fighting game, would be either BlazBlue and Rivals of Aether. Specifically BlazBlue Central Fiction. I think I have to say that first. The reason why is because a Rivals character will usually focus on a single gimmick and then lay layers and layers and layers on top of it so that you can use against the opponent, versus most other platform fighters like Smash that don't really do this. The closest that you would ever technically get to a gimmick in Smash Brothers is probably Peach's Float. Every single other gimmick just feels like, oh, I'm going to get damage, transform, and be a better person. That is not a good gimmick to me. Rivals, however, does this incredibly well. It's almost as though that's kind of the reason why Rivals is the way it is. I truly think that you can put Rivals characters in any other system or in any other game, and they would truly feel too intuitive to feel correct in most other platform fighters. And that is because their gimmicks feel intuitive, they feel correct, they feel fluent in how they, deal with the opponent. So at first, I was very mad for the fact that there are shields and ledges because, at one point I believed that Rivals was, a fast-paced lack of shields, very fast motion, until I realized the reason why I played Rivals wasn't because I could wave dash. The reason why I played Rivals wasn't because it was fast. The reason why I didn't play Rivals wasn't because of the rollback netcode. The reason why I wanted to play Rivals is because I saw that the characters are very interesting. I know it was long to explain that, but basically, if your answer to what is Rivals is the fact that it's fast, the fact that it lacks shields, and it doesn't have ledges, then of course you're not gonna like Rivals 2 or even like any news surrounding it. If you believe that that is the only thing that the Rivals is supposed to be, then of course you're not going to like it. But if you're like me, and Dan, because he said that before, the reason why Rivals is the way it is not because of the things surrounding it. It is the characters. You get rid of the characters, you don't have Rivals. You have platform fighter engine. So now that we've gotten through that argument, the next two arguments are probably going to rustle a few feathers as well. That is the mechanical side and the emotional side. Let's go with the mechanical side first. The mechanical side is basically just the arguments of why you wouldn't like this, even if your reasoning to what is Rivals is the characters. Basically, the argument goes as follows. If you add ledges, and you also add shields, you essentially make the game a lot more slower in pace, which means that a lot more people can zone, a lot more people can do degenerative stuff because of this notion. Thus, if this happens, now the game is ruined. Now, on the surface, this seems like a good argument. However, there's some nuance to this. If you think that shields and ledges are the only reasons of why Smash Bros. And other sort of platform fighter games like Multiversus is slow, I don't really think you're thinking about this in the right way. Basically, in each game, there will always be a different reason of why it's slow. And the reason why Smash Ultimate is so slow is because not only do most characters have a way in order to zone and to be very defensive for no reason, but also the mechanics don't work. Parrying Smash Ultimate doesn't work, because if it did, it would actually bounce back the projectile that someone is throwing at you, so they have to actually deal with it. And guess what? Rivals, along with Rivals 2, is going to do that. Not only that, but the engine makes aerials way too safe, meaning that people are usually going to hit you with an aerial and then run away. So, because everything is so safe, and because investing into a move actually can get you killed, what happens is that players turtle a lot. Whether they use the ledge or whether they just try to zone people out, they do it because actually trying to go for a move that can just kill you doesn't sound nice. So in reality, there's a lot of reasons why Smash Ultimate and other games like it are so slow. The mechanics don't work in order for it to stop people from being slow, and the engine and frame data just makes it so that, oh fuck it, I'm just gonna go for a safe area and leave. Of course I'm gonna do that. So it's not even the shields and ledges to me. I think like most of the mechanics and most of the characters are just not designed well. So of course they're going to be slow. Which is funny because like top 18s and Rivals of Aether are kind of the same thing, and they don't even have shields and ledges. You can talk to any top player or someone that really enjoys Rivals, and they'll even tell you that Rivals can be most of the time a very campy game. Rondo's Needles, Palm just existing, you know, a lot of things you can use to just zone out for the player. But unlike something like Smash Ultimate, you don't have another like defensive thing that you can use like shields so that you can punish people if they try to hit you with safe aerials. This means that because you can't run up and shield in order to protect yourself, you are kind of have to invest in either two things. Either the opponent is getting their aerials wrong, or you get a good parry. And because a good parry, especially at high level, is really tough, players, especially at the top 18, even top 24 or whatever the fuck, players would rather go for the safest option available because it's low investment and it's actually going to hurt the opponent more because they are going to throw an aerial that might miss, and then you can just, because they extended it too far, you can get them. And here's the thing, guys, this game doesn't have shields and ledges, so you can't blame shields and ledges for the fact that this is very slow. So I don't really understand the argument that having shields and ledges are essentially going to make the game just slower than usual when this has been happening for years. I actually think shields in specifically could more than likely fix this problem, because instead of sitting at the corner and throwing shit at the opponent, you would actually inch closer and use your shield in order to block some attacks, but slowly crawl yourself into their sort of sphere, kind of like how Smash 4 does it. Basically, TLDR, shields and ledges are usually, when they're done pretty right, aren't going to be the reason why your platform fighter is slow. There's a lot of other things that you have to think about when it comes to your game being slow, or the fact that people keep using zoning options. Because again, Rivals of Aether top 8s still do that to this very day. So I don't understand this argument. So now that we have that out of the way, we can finally go on to the last argument, which is the emotional argument. This isn't really talked about, and this is more so a me thing before I kind of realize what Rivals is and what Rivals is to me. But basically, this is how I feel. In all of our hatred to try to break away from the game that we usually played, which was Smash, and don't try to lie, you know for a fact, even if you're a Rivals player, your first game was probably Smash, so don't even say that. Basically, in our hatred for trying to find a new sort of game to play, I think we've kind of burned ourselves too much by not trying to incorporate some of the things that the game has probably done well, which is shields and ledges. There are multiple reasons to why a person doesn't want to play Smash anymore and just wants to play something else. Maybe, again, the game's too campy. Maybe there's not enough actual good gameplay that they want to. Maybe there's too many actual character matchups they don't want to. Listen, there's a lot of reasons why. But I think for trying to prop up Rivals so much, we kind of just beat the shit out of Smash Bros way too much for our own good, especially when now, at least at this very moment, a lot of you probably either still believe that shields and ledges are just bad mechanics that shouldn't be in a lot of other games. I think we kind of flew too far into the sun with that take, because we've seen multiple other platform fighters actually implement these in a good way. Rushdown Revolt does this very well. I don't understand this argument. But it only makes sense when you deal with the emotional aspect. A lot of people have had enough of Smash Brothers, has had too many bad experiences with the game and wanted to do something else. So that rage, that sort of hatred, and that sort of criticism kind of amplifies this sort of thing when Rivals 2 does something different. Because adding these mechanics into the game could remind you of Smash Brothers and just sort of the pain and agony that you had to feel when you play this game. So with their inclusion, you get this sort of emotional sort of effect and you just hate them. When in reality, I don't really think you hate shields and ledges. I just think you hate Smash, because they did it first. And because they're in here now you're reminded of that pain. And, you know, that's fair. Emotions are emotions. But you gotta understand the reasons why you feel this way rather than just pointing at a single argument and just saying that's what it is, when there might be an undertone to this sort of thing. A lot of Smash characters and a lot of mechanics in the game just make playing it, especially after a while when you figure out how it works, unpleasant. But the same goes for Rivals. The same goes for a lot of other, you know, platform fighters if you could really think about it, like multiverses. But there is a lot of ways that Rivals 2 could and probably have already checked out when it came to this sort of mechanics. Dan and the team are very good at what they do, and I don't think that they would let something like this just cave over through their heads and really just ruin the game because of it. I personally believe that these are things that have already been considered when it comes to Rivals 2, and all that's happening is that we haven't gotten a lot of information on it, so we cave into our emotional side and we just say, oh, it's Smash now, so it's bad. But I don't think it's going to be like Smash at all. Well, it will, but not in the way that you think. They actually care for their sort of mechanics, such as, you know, no shield poking, still adding parries to the game, you know. For as much as Sakurai makes things look pretty, Dan makes them work well. Basically, whatever you're feeling right now when it comes to the emotional side and how you believe that this game is just going to be a Smash ripoff now, just look into yourself, look at the game, and just think about it. Are shields and ledges really the problem, or is this something else? What can they do in order to, you know, mitigate this sort of thing? Once you go through that process, it's pretty easy to see that more than likely this isn't going to be a big problem. And even if let's say 100% you're right, and it is. Let's say Dan and the team couldn't figure this out in launch and now everything is just a campy, buggy mess. Do you really think that they're just going to sit on their ass and just not do anything about it? No, I don't think so. I think Dan is going to spend every single probably waking moment in order to make sure that that game doesn't become that. So I'm just going to say this, and it's not in a mean manner. It's not in a way where I think you're booty butt cheeks. Here's what I'm saying. I think shields and ledges are going to be a net positive, and I think before we even judge the whole thing, while we haven't even gotten a lot of information, we've only gotten a few clips on Twitter, until we get enough, I wouldn't put stocks in this being a mess. At least not yet. Okay, cool. We've gone over every argument, at least to me, that I can think of when it comes to shields and ledges. So that's everything. And I understand that there's probably going to be a lot of reactions in the comment section. And, you know, I'll read it eventually, you know. Put your shit down below. Tell me how I'm wrong. You know, we can have a conversation about it. I'm just saying we gotta at least talk about it first. Okay, so now that information is put to the ether, let me tell you a few good things that Shield and Ledges could bring for the series. When a new player tries to play Rivals, I've heard the sort of same arguments over and over again. Usually, when they play a game versus someone that even has weeks of experience compared to you, it feels like too much of an uphill battle. Add on to the fact that the game doesn't really have a lot of other defensive mechanics in order to like help you if you were to make mistakes. You really feel it when a new player is getting dogged on with gameplay. Personally, I believe that with Shields and Ledges, this sort of apathy that new players have can slowly go away. Because now there's at least a few options that people can do if you're getting dogged on by someone and you can recollect your breath in order to face somebody. Not only that, but Rivals has this thing where a lot of kills that you're going to get is a lot of rinse and repeat edgeguard combos. So simply having a ledge where for 2 seconds you're invulnerable and you can get back into the stage will minimize this a lot. And with shields, you can actually punish a lot of good buttons that people have and grab them. Or a lot of projectiles that would need a big investment such as a parry doesn't really need it anymore and you could sort of inch yourself forward. Now, does this mean that a casual is going to be a player that still is good at the game? No, not by any means. Again, this isn't so that casual players can beat the pros. This is giving casuals or giving low-level people some type of chance. And if they feel like they at least have a chance, then instead of just getting rid of the game or not even looking at the game anymore because it's just too hard and it's too defeating, now they will slowly have a goal and they'll try to keep playing the game more and more.
All due respect, but I really don't care.
Rather than the fact that they're getting put in the blender over and over again, and you practically need like 200 hours in order to even understand why you're getting put in the blender without going fully into the tutorial multiple times. Rather than let people go through that grueling task, let them have their defensive options now. Let the gameplay, or even if the tutorial is good, then that's cool too. But let them slowly get them into the game rather than put them into the ground because you're just so much better simply by knowing one aspect of the game. This is why I really enjoy the fact that Shields and Ledges are here. A lot more people are going to feel like they can actually play Rivals now instead of getting dog walked by every single mediocre player in the vicinity. Alright, I think that's it actually. I think that's everything that I have to talk about when it comes to Shield and Ledges. We talked about a lot of controversial things, and we talked about a lot of good things. But at least it's there in the ether now, and now we can finally discuss it rather than going on Twitter and pretending that we're just better and more informed than anyone else, and we can actually have a discussion. Cool! And if you think that this video is already long enough, you don't even know. We gotta talk about single player. Now, there's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to single player, but we gotta put this idea at the forefront first. I believe and agree with the idea that you need single player in your fighting games to do very well. And when I say well, I don't mean money-wise, because you cannot have a story mode in your fighting game and do well when it comes to economic-wise. I mean for player retention. It does not matter how good you can make the competitive aspect of a game, because it will always pale in comparison to the sort of casual and single-player content that you put in it. This isn't even me just making shit up. This is for any game or any game genre out there. Look at things like Team Fortress 2 and Halo 3. A lot of the competitive aspects of the game are still intact and still get played once in a while, but the main reason of why casual players come back is because of the single player modes and the workshop elements with it. This is why not even just platform fighters, but fighting games in general have a very low retention when it comes to gaining players. There's no other fun things that a low level player or even a mid level player can do in order to extend the fun ratio. Basically, it makes it so that if you're not playing a competitive game over and over again in order to try to get better, then every single time that you step away from it, you're just always going to be worse than your friends that are probably going to be better than you. And if they're automatically going to be better than you because they play the game more, then you can't provide any fun to them because a lot of the things that you can do are very predictable, and there's just not a lot of fun you can have if someone is just too worse than you. This is a casual's worst nightmare, and that's kind of the reason why we don't get as many casuals in order to get to our game. Not only that, but no one simply talks about the fact of how you can actually build an audience when it comes to a competitive game anyway. Not only that, but I simply don't think that people think about how effective it could be for your fighting game if you can take your casual player and simply from there make them competitive, rather than getting people that are already competitive in order to play your game. The two games that I can really put this on a bow would definitely be Them's Fighting Herds and Smash Brothers in general. Them's Fighting Herds literally has the best tutorial because it's tied in with the story of what you play, and it's way different and unique compared to every single other fighting game ever. There are so many people that play that game that were dirty ass casuals that didn't know what EX was, didn't know how to like super, didn't know how to do an aerial, nothing. And because they played the story mode, and because it was already good from there on, because they liked the story and it actually teach them in a fun way, guess what? Those casuals became competitive players. Even if you didn't want to do that approach, Smash Bros. Proves that as much content as you can put into a single player game, that thing will just incentivize people more to just go to the competitive nature. Look at Hungrybox. If Hungrybox never played any of the modes when it came to Melee ever with Puff, he would never have played the game competitively. If that alone can show you that having a single player is actually kind of needed in this day and age, and would actually, needed, it can actually help you, I think you should add it. So for people that believe that story modes and single players doesn't do anything and they shouldn't be focusing on it, I would really recommend that you actually look into what you're talking about, because I don't think you do. It's just the truth. We need casual people. Those casual people, if they like the game enough, which is probably going to be a lot of them can become competitive players in the future, and thus it's just going to grow anyway. It's a much better time than just trying to force already competitive players that don't know anything about your game, about a system that they probably don't like in the first place, just so in a month they just dub your shit. TLDR, single player modes are needed. I won't hear any of this. Now, let's go into the more fun aspects of this. Let's see what they can do with single player modes. I guess what we have to talk about is the story mode, like what's going to happen in the story, and I guess the subspace access to it. Let me talk about subspace first, only because the lore when it comes to Rivals of Aether, when it comes to a story, can be very finicky, so let's go over that. We have gotten information that the story mode is going to include a sort of subspace sort of event for the game. We have also been promised that this sort of subspace emissary is going to be a lot more better designed way compared to the subspace emissary of like Brawl. So this one will have a lot of mechanics that I probably would like. If you guys don't know, months ago when I was starting the channel, I actually answered this question on what story modes or what bosses should be when it comes to platform fighters. Because, especially when it comes to Brawl, a lot of bosses and a lot of enemies just don't feel fun to face. When it comes to regular enemies, it really feels as though that they're just random hitboxes attacking you, and there's not like a lot of strategy that you would need in order to fell these beasts. Not only that, but for some reason they give the mechanic that if you hit an enemy, they actually spiral out of control just to hit another enemy. So there's honestly no reason why the only strategy that you should use is just get up into some enemy's face and just hit them. There's nothing. When it comes to bosses, they don't have this problem. They have it in a different way. See, I've already talked about it in my video before, but I'll use the example regardless. I talked about Rayquaza and the fact that when you fight him, although it's a cool looking fight, he doesn't really react to you. He just sits there and does a lot of attacks, just sits there mindlessly, tanks your attacks with no reaction, and then that's it, you beat him. And that is most bosses, even when it comes to endgame, and even when it comes to Smash Ultimate, if I'm being real honest with you. And the only reason why Smash Ultimate is a little better is the fact that their weak points are in a specific body part, so you actually have to go in and hit a specific version. It's still not intuitive or good though. Other sort of games require more of the player in order to actually beat bosses. Hollow Knight does this to an upteenth degree because there's many strategies, including waiting specifically for an opening or dashing through someone, for example, so that you can destroy the boss. Different strategies and unique things that you can do to enemies or bosses is the reason why that Hollow Knight is so good, and it's kind of the reason why Subspace is so bad. It plays like a fucking baby game, which I get it. It's Smash Bros. It plays like, it plays for younger people, but this isn't Smash Bros. This is another platform fighter. I am a big man. Let me gain some actual skill in your fighting game. So what they can do is that, and I've already talked about the bosses, like I've already talked about the bosses in my video, so I won't talk about that, but I'll talk about what they can do for enemies when it comes to this game, for Subspace. I would really want different enemy types so that I have to face them in a sort of different way. Like, I have a list, so let's explain it here. A shield guy. I think there should be a person that has a shield and your normal attacks and like maybe your counters and things like that can't work on it. So the only way in order to get rid of it is to grab it, throw it away, and then hit them. For snipers, maybe they can run away from you, and the only way in order to actually like get them off the screen, or a very good ability that you can use in order to get them off the screen, is actually to parry them. And remember, we don't have to be too simple like this. If you wanted some complexity, even having a Medusa-like character in the game where the only way to beat them is with back airs could be enough. You know, you reference it by the fact that you can't attack her while you're looking at her because then you'll get like paralyzed, so you have to use back airs. Even something like that is more interesting, exponentially more interesting than what regular ass Smash Brothers does. Hell, to be more interesting, you don't even need combat. If you really wanted, you can have a stage where the point of the entire thing is so that you don't get noticed by other guards. So you have to like move past and sneakily move by them by using your movement and also like objects around so that you can make them not see you. Again, anything to make it any better than what we got beforehand is good to me. And again, I don't want to get into bosses, at least for right now, because I've already made a whole video explaining how they can do bosses right. So we're just going to go on with the next one, which is the story. See, the story that Rivals 2 can do is very weird because you would have to know everything that were happening in other games so that you can get some sort of inkling. And even then, they could always like do another part of the story that we couldn't have seen, or just like reference something that was like even in Rivals 1 that we just wouldn't have gone to. So it's very weird. So before I go through it, this is going to be a warning. I'm going to get into a lot of things that the previous games has talked about and probably try to figure out what the story is going to do at this point in time. So if you don't want to be spoiled, then here we go. And just so that there's one more warning, I'm probably going to talk about Arcane and how he's probably more different than what you think he is. So if you think that is way too interesting in order to know now, you yourself can look at a walkthrough of Dungeon if you really want to. But I'm going to go over most of the things that I think make sense. See, the problem is when it comes to determining Rivals 2 story mode is that there's a lot. So let's talk about the villain first. The villain is most definitely going to be Loxodon. Now the thing is what can Loxodon do in this game is kind of the question. Because me personally, I really think that if he's going to continue his plan in order to make himself very powerful, he would need a lot of things in order to have that reign. And some of the things that he could have is the Air Armada and the stones that we've actually seen in Dungeons of Aether. We already kind of get the feeling that we should hate the Air Armada, considering the fact that Eliana's whole thing is that she was kind of messed up by them, and that's the reason why that she's a quote-unquote terrorist now. So it only kind of makes sense that most of what we're going to be dealing, at least when it comes to enemies, has to be like Air Armada enemies or something like that. We also know that potentially he's going to be at the forefront when it comes to the fire capital, and probably that's what he's going to be reigning in. So we're probably going to deal with a lot of fire capital guys as well. Now the thing is that there's two things that Loxodon could use. First of all, the stones. We've seen these stones before, specifically the Fire Stone when it comes to like in Rivals 1. But now in Dungeons of Aether, we've actually seen 3 stones as is from other elements, but I have no idea where they are. Again, I haven't really played Dungeon too much, so maybe it's explained there, but I do know a lot of information when it comes to it in order to come to that result. The second idea is the darkness. See, the darkness has been referenced in not only Rivals 1 but also Dungeons of Aether in order for them to, like, in previous civilizations that they actually create havoc across the world. But I could really see Loxodon trying to filter and sort of store the power of the darkness in himself in order to like rule the land. So if we end up getting a boss battle with this guy and the fact that he actually absorbs the darkness into himself in order to become a mega boss, wouldn't really be too surprised. Technically, if you really wanted to, you can also get the water people that were like doing that big business. Like he can control that so we can face water dudes as well. So maybe, but again, Information is very low when it comes to this thing, so it'd be very weird if they didn't or did include it, considering the fact that there's almost nothing. Remember, that's the simple version. We still have to go through every single other character, and it just gives me a migraine just thinking about it. Think about it like this. Who's gonna be the main character in Rivals 2? If you think it's just gonna be Fleet, you know Claren's right there, right? You know Zetterburn and also Forsburn are also there, right? And it's so weird considering the fact that we have so many supporting characters that could probably get a role. I guess Forsburn and Zetterburn their arc is done now, so they don't really have to do a lot, but it just seems a little weird, man. And as with Claren, if Loxodon, more than likely, if Loxodon is the main villain, it would seem very weird to just get rid of that aspect of her just trying to like go through the whole story to beat Loxodon so that we focus on Fleet and the other 3 dungeons characters. It's very weird because Artemis also has this sub-story where apparently she's going to have to kill Zetterburn, which is so weird, and I don't know how you're going to like filter that in like 10 minutes of gameplay if you really wanted to. Maybe they can do something with it. It just seems like a lot. So what the hell are you going to do with Orcane? Again, this is a spoiler warning. Apparently Orcane is like this god-like entity like Sylvanos named Hope or something, and then apparently like he has business that he's going to be with Slade in order to like do some sort of shit. And it's like, I'll get to it in the end, but this is just everything that we know now. I guess characters like Raster, Crag, and Maple don't really need too much, especially since most of the time they're more so based on their characteristics rather than their being in part in the story. So maybe we can have some leeway with it. But think about it like this, some of these characters aren't even going to be in the single player because they're going to be DLC. Like, I highly doubt things like Edelus, maybe Sylvanos like that, are going to be in the main game, so they would have to get their stories later. But it seems weird when some of their stories are contained within other characters, like Sylvanos versus Malo. It's so weird. There is just a lot of things that Rivals has when it comes to lore that they probably are going to bring to Rivals 2. I just don't have a very good way that you can bring all of this together in a beautiful bow for people to like enjoy the story. Not saying it can't happen, they probably already did that. My problem is, I don't know how in the blue hell you would do something like this. It would take a lot of time and effort. Because not only are you looking at Fleet and the other 3 characters from Dungeons, you're also bringing in Claren, you're also bringing in Zetterburn and Forsburn so that they can probably team up on Loxodon because they're taking over everything. You would have to reference like Orcane and Slade, maybe they get like a new sort of power, but also you have the 3 supporting characters of Maple, of Crag, of Raster. Maybe you have to like beat them up severally so that we can like get them back and try to like do one big sort of push on Loxodon, I guess. It's just a lot of information and characters to go through, you know? So hopefully they can find a way to implement this not in a bad way, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of casuals that might like this sort of lore implications, but they need it to be done well so that they can just exemplify their love for this sort of thing even more. If people like your lore, more than likely they're gonna tune into your game. League of Legends proves this to an utmost T. There's almost like 50 or like 80% of the audience fucking hates this dog shit ass game, but a lot of people simply like the lore too much to where they will just funnel in their money into like getting potential timelines that they discuss with other people, and they just enjoy it that much. That's how serious this can be. But you know, just like how I have faith and trust in Jesus, I'll trust in Dan. I'm pretty sure Dan and the team can make this work. And even if it doesn't go like, even if it's only 80% good, that's really all you need. Just make it as good as you can. Also, don't just make it good, make it emotional. If you can make me cry as Claren cleaves like Loxodon into 2 thinking about her mom and her dad, that's only gonna make the thing better, man. Basically, there's a lot that the story needs to incorporate, or should incorporate. So, let's just hope that they can do it very well. Okay, cool. Serious stuff over. We've done the story mode, and we've done what the subspace could look like. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty. What other modes can we play? I think if we're going to have a subspace sort of thing in this game, I truly think that we should probably have a Mario Maker-esque thing when it comes to the game. Basically, since we already have aspects and we already have the models in the game of like enemies and bosses, maybe you can also give us tools so that we can make our own stages, maybe make our own stories, I guess, if you really could. I don't know how in the blue hell you would do this, but it definitely would go well with the community. I don't know, maybe you can call it Aether Maker or some shit. What you could also do is improve Abyss mode. See, Abyss mode is actually pretty fun. I think the problem is that it kind of feels too rushed in a sort of sense. These modes and these gameplay aspects are very fun for me to do. The problem is that they're so quick, and it's like it has nothing to do with the story, and it just goes in a loop, so it makes it feel odd. Also, you know how you had custom moves in Abyss mode where you can actually like pay to do them? I would actually rather that you kind of like unlock those things probably in the story mode, and then there's like an alternative custom mode that you can do with your friends, I guess. Because listen, casuals will play the game, but if they see Zetaburn just do a down B and 2 meteors happen across, they're gonna want to keep playing the game more and more. So just keep that aspect if you can, or add it later. I don't give a shit. This will also be very good in order to prevent people from getting workshop buys, because a lot of people want workshop to be in the game. I do too, but it's not going to be here on release. But if you were to add these sorts of modes in the game beforehand, you basically have the tools that you need in order to make your own sort of workshop content, or even just playing against casuals very funly. Like, I don't know. I think it's good. I also have heard that people should bring tetherball back. I don't know, I've never really played tetherball. It seems very not interesting, especially since some characters can kind of just sit there and just hit the ball again. So personally to me, it's not fun. So I don't know why people want this back, but if you bring it back, I guess. I've also heard from a lot of Melee people that they would actually really want an adventure mode for the series. I don't know how fun it is for adventure mode in Melee. I believe there's like a few sort of cutscenes and there's a few sort of good things that happen. But whatever's in that game, if people like it that much in order to become competitive players, fuck it, add it in, I guess. Alright, this would be the last sort of single player mode that I'd be talking about until we get to the character list. So, I believe that if you really want casuals in the game, you should have modes that are fun and chaotic. So I would recommend the Groove System mode. In the workshop, you can download something called the Groove System, and what it does is that it changes the aspect of Rivals and changes it to other platform fighters. Meaning, if you have the R system, right, you can change the system mechanics of Rivals and make them rush down Revolt, where you can actually press a button, cancel the move you're doing, and just do another move. Or maybe you can do it like Smash 64, where one hit gets you comboed for days. I would add 5 of these sort of modes and just tuck them in a little arcade section so that other people can play it and just have fun. Also, before I forget, I'm pretty sure a lot of people want items in the game, or like want some sort of fun, sort of chaotic stuff like that. So if you can make a few and like tie them in with the modes that they're in order to make them even better, that would be what you should do. Okay. Fucking finally. We finally got through the big section of single player.
The worst crime you can commit is dick riding without a license.